Ladies and gentlemen, fight fans all around the world, let's talk some boxing. So we're going to talk about timing and placement very quickly. It's an extension of the video before. If you haven't seen it, just go check out the video before this one. And in this video, it's really talking more not about in the moment, in the ring timing and placement per se, but also about how a fighter can know the moment when he can really attack his opponent. Take, for instance, Ali versus George Foreman in the Rumble in the Jungle in Zaire. Here, Muhammad Ali is crashing George Foreman, and George Foreman does not rise. But that's because Ali knows George Foreman is tired. See, there is a time when your opponent will have worn down and become tired. And that's what happened with George Foreman. He actually wore his own self out against Muhammad Ali, who was using the high guard, the low guard, the double guard to protect his body and his head. And he let George Foreman basically punch himself out. And when he was very, very tired and exhausted, that's when Muhammad Ali attacked him. And it's a strategy that most smart boxers in the ring actually employ. It's not only about power, it's all about smarts. You'd see Floyd Mayweather, Roy Jones Jr., Pernell Whitaker, Sugar Ray Leonard, Sugar Ray Robinson, Manny Pacquiao implement these strategies. Okay? So timing is not just in the moment timing, but it's also your game plan, what you may formulate as the fight is going along. Another thing that has to do with timing is when a fight actually takes place. And sometimes you hear a fighter say, yes, the fight takes place at the right time. That can mean different things, of course. But generally speaking, when they say it takes place at the right time, these fighters are not thinking about necessarily the opponent that they're facing, but they're thinking about the amounts of monies that may be accrued. Take, for instance, Mike Tyson versus Lennox Lewis. It was a huge fight. Huge fight. It made a lot of money. And mainly because everyone wanted to see Lennox Lewis face Mike Tyson a long time in coming. That was a very long time in building. Even Holyfield versus Tyson, that was a long time in coming. And for various reasons, it just didn't happen. Tyson got knocked out by Buster Douglas. Evander Holyfield had some hiccups in his career as well. Lennox Lewis also had some hiccups in his career as well. So that it never really panned out because of that. With Mayweather-Pacquiao, it might have happened earlier if Pacquiao didn't get knocked out by Marquez. Remember, Pacquiao got knocked out by Marquez in 2012. And that kind of delayed the fight as well. So he had little hiccups in there why that fight didn't happen. But the difference between Mayweather-Pacquiao and, say, Holyfield-Tyson and Lennox Lewis-Tyson and even, is that Mayweather tried to make the fight with Pacquiao, and Pacquiao turned it down. However, it must be mentioned that, again, fights happen in the times that they're allowed to happen. And one of the things you can know is if the fans demand of it, there are fights which just have to happen. So it's really awesome that Mayweather actually fought Manny Pacquiao. Pacquiao actually fought Floyd Mayweather. That was a fight that had to happen. It happened at the right time for the fighters, and from the fighters' perspective, because they made a ton of money off of those fights. Manny Pacquiao he's a senator because he's got so much money in the Philippines, according to a trainer, actually, a guy who's actually training a Filipino trainer himself. So Manny Pacquiao is big in the Philippines, to be honest with you. I can tell you a couple other fights which were like that. You have Sugar Ray Leonard versus Marvin Hagler. That took a while to happen. And when it did happen, it happened at the right time. Of course, Leonard thought he could beat Hagler. That's why he was ready for that. There are a number of them where it took a long time for these two fighters to actually meet each other and face each other. And so timing, even in how fights are built up and happen. Carl Frampton versus Leo Santa Cruz. It actually happened, and that's awesome. The only fights that still are left to see and hopefully will happen are fights with Guillermo Rigondeaux and some other big name. So we'll see. We'll see if he's shunned or if there's a fight that happens with him. I think he will get a fight because he's with Rock Nation. So they will have a fight. Maybe with Lomachenko, maybe with whoever. But that fight is going to happen. Rigo, in the meantime, is making sure he stays sharp. So my point anyway is that timing is everything. Timing is everything, and it's not so much that the fighters don't want to fight one another. Usually, it's about money. But for those people who are talking about, oh, let certain fights I forgot the word that they actually use for it, but let it stay on the shelf a little longer to cure, or whatever you want to call it. Not all fights are like that. The only reason Pacquiao Mayweather actually went this long was because Pacquiao got knocked out in the process. And when Pacquiao got knocked out, it kind of went off the shelf for a while. But then it came back on the shelf when Pacquiao showed that he rebounded quite well from his loss. So, at the end of the day, Mayweather-Pacquiao, there were a number of variables that caused it to kind of hang around so long and people still be interested in the fight. But that's an exception to the rule. Nonetheless, timing is everything in the business of boxing. Some fights need to happen immediately. There's no reason for them not to happen immediately. Other fights, it gets a little complicated getting those fights to happen, especially if you're dealing with really, really high level boxers at the top of their game, and they're pound for pound big boxers out there. Kovalev versus Andre Ward was a really fun fight that actually happened, and happened rather quickly. Andre Ward moved up in weight and fought Sergey Kovalev. But if Andre Ward was making really big money, like tens of millions of dollars, and Sergey Kovalev was making tens of millions of dollars, they would have been a lot more complicated and a lot more difficult for Ward and Kovalev to fight one another. So the more money both people make it's the more difficult it is. And that's been so through the ages. So don't think that like this is something new. Sugar Ray Robinson would make demands because he was the guy that was the draw. So he made his demands. So timing is everything. And remember, this is prize fighting. So don't expect the fighters not to squibble over money. They will squibble over money, especially if they're towards the ends of their careers. Like, I'm not mad at Miguel Cotto at all, because Miguel Cotto worked for every penny he's earning. And at the end of their careers, which is another important point, boxers or fighters at the end of their careers, they're looking for paydays. They really are, because they paid their dues. They've been, especially if they're at the top of the game, they paid their dues. They did what they needed to do. So expect them to want to get as much money as possible. Sadly, when it comes to the case of Bernard Hopkins, Sugar Ray Leonard, Sugar Ray Robinson, and a ton of other fighters, they don't know when to quit. And that's why timing is also everything. You must know when to leave the game and not come back. Joe Calzaghe did a great job with that. Rocky Marciano was another guy. You got a couple fighters who they knew when to just call it a day. Gennaro Hernandez, unfortunately, got beat by Mayweather and then by Pacquiao, by Oscar De La Hoya. De La Hoya is another sad one who had to take a really bad beating to get out the game of boxing. But for the most part, if you know when to hang them up, that also works for you. Marvin Hagler, he knew when to hang it up, and he called it a day, and he did the wise thing, Thomas Hearns, he had to get an injury and get beaten out the ring. So it's kind of sad for some of these fighters. Yes, you have fighting in your blood, I understand that, but sometimes you have to do like Carl Froch. You get the itch to want to fight, that's okay. You can have the itch to want to fight. Don't come back. You left the game, leave it, move on to something else in your life. Larry Holmes, he was wise enough to be able to hang him up and call it a day. So timing in boxing has to do with a lot of things, and I just wanted to add these additional elements to it. I saw Sugar Ray Leonard actually talking about older fighters always thinking they need to come back. You don't have to come back. Usually at the age of 35 to 38, that's about it. That's your last hurrah right there. And I think some of these guys, man, they think they have eternal youth on their side. Just call it a day. You might be a fighter, but call it a day. Translate that fighting now into something else. And so that's just a word of advice to young fighters. It's a young man's sport. You don't have to stay there forever. Bernard Hopkins was an exception to the rule, and even he didn't know when to quit. So just call it a day, man. Roy Jones Jr. still doesn't know when to quit, and it's kind of sad. You guys have a great one.